The following program is brought to you by Naleo TV, the People's Platform.
Aloha, I'm Tom Peak from Volcano. I've lived and worked on the big island of Hawaii for almost 35 years. I'm the author of two novels that set here on the big island. Mauna Kea, a novel of Hawaii, and Daughters of Fire. These two novels reflect my 3 decades living on the big island of Hawaii. I was blessed because when I first got to Hawaii, I was hired to be an early tour guide on Mauna Kea up at Halepohaku, and I lived on the mountain. Eventually, I had to leave that job because of the proposals for further development and joined the movement to protect the Mauna. My first novel, Daughters of Fire, reflects my experiences working at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park as an eruption ranger, a wildland firefighter, and ultimately an exhibit writer. So these two novels, while they're page-turning adventures, romance, intrigue, Hawaiian culture, political intrigue, they're also serious books about what happened to Hawaii after statehood. This one illuminates real estate development and tourism development. And this one, Mauna Kea, discusses what happened with the mountain and also the nearby militarization at Pohakaloa military camp. But they're fun books to read, and I hope both of them are heartwarming tales that illuminate the power of aloha in an age of polarization and violence. Today, I'm going to read some from Mauna Kea, and I hope you enjoy the tale. This is a contemporary novel, but there are several important historical chapters to put the action of the story into a larger perspective. The thing I'm going to read to you today is a fictional rendering of an actual story, which has now become part of the modern lore of Mauna Kea. This chapter is set on the mountain's upper slopes between two giant cinder cones, Pu'uwaiao, inside which is the sacred lake, and Pu'upoleahu, home of the revered snow goddess. Chapter 28, The Thin Veil, September 1965. 2 young men recuperated from the cold alpine night in a government surplus truck trailer hauled 12,000 feet up Mauna Kea as a weatherproof shelter on the gentle slope above Pu'uwaiao. Usually they chatted, read magazines, and watched the clock for their next scheduled check on the mountain's very first telescope, built atop the cone of the snow goddess, Poleahu. But that night, strange sounds had them spooked. Both local boys from Honolulu, a Chinese American and a haole, they knew the dormant volcano was veiled in mystery and had even heard that spirits dwelt up there. They were also keenly aware that they were utterly alone. A year earlier, the Arizona astronomer, Dr. Gerard Kuiper, renowned father of planetary astronomy, had convinced NASA that Mauna Kea's remote peaks might offer the best U.S. alternative to the sullied skies of industrial America. Hawaii's gung-ho governor, after spurring post-statehood development on Oahu and Maui, now had his eyes set on the Big Island, and he allocated money to bulldoze a rough track from Halepohaku to the top of Pu'upoleahu, where Kuiper planted his 12.5-inch telescope to collect data on the mountain's seeing conditions. That same telescope and other instruments out on the North Plateau would soon determine the site for the world's 7th largest telescope and the first major observatory on the mountain. A NASA-funded sky gazer with a whopping 88-inch mirror. Donnie Woe and Buck Hamilton, young men with tough constitutions, adventurous spirits, and technical skills learned in the Army, gladly accepted the job collecting the data. Each evening, they drove the jarring jeep trail from the crude quarters in the hunter's hut at Halepohaku up to a nighttime base camp in the windowless truck trailer they affectionately called their rest can. The technical challenges of the job and the prospect of being part of an ambitious science quest more than offset the lonely isolation of the dormant volcano's vast upper slopes, at least until that night. 40-knot gusts transformed the 40-degree temperature near the lake into wind chills well below freezing, and cold air seeped under the trailer's door and through its air vents. Woe and Hamilton warmed up on their bunks next to the propane heater. In a half hour, at midnight, they would drive the track up Pu'upoleahu and then out to the 13 North site to collect their data. Woe perused the latest Edmund Scientific as he replenished his ashtray with one spent cigarette after another. Hamilton consumed Fig Newtons and black coffee. "What's that scratching sound?" Hamilton said, cocking an ear toward the door of the trailer. It took a moment in the oxygen-lean air to remember that the highest trees on Mauna Kea stood 3,000 feet below them. They flashed each other puzzled looks. Again the scratching. Scream. "Maybe we should go look?" Woe said indifferently, hiding behind his catalog. "You mean maybe I should go? You're the one who seems bothered by it." Hamilton was bothered. He'd worked on the mountain longer than Woe and knew that Hawaiians of old had rarely trekked as high as they were now. Hamilton was the guy who'd planted the route flags in front of the bulldozer that cut the trail. Each time the crew passed one of the mountain's many ancient stone shrines, he wondered how Hawaiians would feel had they known Howleys were opening a road to their revered mountaintop. He remembered feeling creepy at times, glancing over his shoulder with the distinct feeling of being watched. He also knew that one man had already lost his life opening up the mountain, crushed beneath the backhoe when its brakes mysteriously gave out, sending it pell-mell down the mountain into rocks off the half-cleared road. "Probably just wind," Hamilton suggested. "Yeah, wind," replied Woe. The scratching ceased a minute or two later, and they donned their parkas for the jeep ride up to Dr. Kuiper's instruments. When they finally got back, pre-dawn light dimly illuminated the trailer and the tall wooden staircase next to it. Climbing the steps, they noticed several blue-gray streaks on the trailer's wall above the staircase, the steel exposed where its white coat of paint had been scraped away. The next night, it was Woe who first heard the scratching. And although the gusts were less than the night before, the two debated whether the cold, dry air somehow made the old paint easier to strip off in the wind. The unnerving sounds lasted much longer that night, and the pair didn't even discuss going out to see what was happening. As they left for their midnight data check, Hamilton's ever-ready flashlight revealed more paint gone. This happened 2 more nights, always a little before midnight, and the unnerved technicians decided enough was enough, and that on the next night they would find out what was visiting them. Hamilton volunteered to open the door when the scratching began, while Woe would shine their big 9-volt spotlight on the wall. It started at 11:55. Scream. "Okay, Buck, this is it," said Woe, grabbing the spotlight. He moved into position behind the door. "What are we going to do if there's something really weird out there?" "Wing it," said Hamilton, grabbing the latch. He yanked it open, and Woe shone the light. Scream! The sound much louder with the door wide open. Woe and Hamilton peered out at the wall above the empty staircase. In the bright oval of Woe's light, they watched aghast as strips of paint peeled off the wall. Hamilton slammed the door and peered into Woe's astonished face. "The wind," Woe pronounced, switching off the spotlight, just like I said that first night. Back down at Halipohaku, Hamilton tossed in his bed, unable to get his usual 7-hour sleep during the day. Dead on his feet, he asked Woe to drive them up for their nighttime shift, the howling wind blowing cinder ash against the windshield. The two spent much of the jarring journey reassuring each other that their unnerving mystery was solved. Even so, both grew wary as midnight approached. The hour came and went without any scratching. If ever winds could peel paint, the ones that night certainly would. Yet in the remaining months of the project, no scratching was heard and no more paint disappeared. Eventually, as normal job routines diluted their alarming memories of those nights, they allowed themselves to tell a few people about how the mountain winds once played tricks on them. But their intrigues weren't over. The thing about books is that they reflect the writing of people, real people, in real communities, and they provide a deeper, more interesting, more complex view of life than a lot of the stuff you see on television or certainly on the internet. Both of my books are available at Basically Books in Hilo and other bookstores on the Big Island, and they're also available in the library. I set out to write these books partly to process all the experiences I was having because I was connected to people on Kilauea and on Mauna Kea, and I needed to understand the experiences I was having. But if I was going to do that, I wanted to write honest, authentic tales that are more realistic, because there's a whole myth about Hawaii that is not in the service of the archipelago, this island, or the people who inhabit it. And that's what I tried to do with these. Mahalo for listening to my reading today and for tuning in to Island Storybook. Aloha.
Special mahalo to Basically Books for supporting literacy here on Hawaii Island. Naleo TV wants to encourage reading and writing in an ever-changing digital world. Reading is a fundamental skill that opens up a world of knowledge, imagination, and personal growth. Mahalo for tuning in to this episode of Island Storybook. Check out our website, naleo.tv, for more videos on demand, and get ready for the next story we find.